Well, I guess it's time to talk about our classic movie.
Yes.
You know, Daniel, the day when this movie graced your life was the most important day for you. But for me, it was Tuesday. That's right.
Yes.
Street Fighter the movie.
Yes.
So I had not seen this one. I'm just going to go ahead and close all my various if tabs here so we don't get distracted. So I had not seen this movie since I was in college because when I was in college, I was the treasurer for our school's video game club,
Mm,
and I had the idea: what if we just had bad video game movie night?
yeah.
Now, this being like 2006, seven or so, there weren't that many bad video game movies, but we had some fun with Uwe Boll and with Street Fighter Two, or excuse me,
Yeah.
Street Fighter the movie, which is confusingly based more on Street Fighter Two as a franchise because that was the one that actually was the cultural moment.
Yes. Yeah. And yes, Ninja. Yeah. One great bad movie. Um, yeah. So for me, like I didn't see it in the theater, but I did watch it a lot when it was out on video. And I think largely that was because it's basically a live action cartoon. Like it's
Yes.
the writing and the storytelling is kind of styled like a Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah, I was trying to remember if I thought that this was okay. So you have things like The Room, where you have somebody sincerely trying to tell a story and just falling out of the trouble tree and hitting every branch on the way down.
Yeah,
And so what was meant to be heartfelt turns out to be ridiculous.
yeah,
And I almost had it in my head that this movie was similar, but as I'm watching through it, I'm like, oh, okay, this is all like this is the director's vision right here on the screen.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. And speaking of the director, the writer and director is Stephen E. D'Souza, who was one. He was one of the writers on Die Hard. He also wrote 48 Hours, and which we reviewed a few months back.
Okay.
Yeah, and he also wrote Commando with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Uh,
Okay, so the guy had a particular bent.
yes, yeah. Uh, but yeah. So to get into the plot of the movie,
Such as it is.
such as it is, yeah. So the the movie kind of takes place in the fictional country of Shadaloo, which is I think it's probably supposed to be like Thailand or Cambodia or Vietnam, somewhere around in there.
Yeah, it's that sort of Southeast Asian weird cultural mishmash that you can get because uh, even in the same country, because it's like I want to say it's something like two-thirds the world's commerce passes through there,
Yeah,
some crazy percent like that.
yeah, yeah, um, yeah. A lot of stuff going through the South China Sea. Yeah, and so the country is basically being run by General Bison, played in a scene chewing performance by the late Raul Julia. Um,
In possibly his greatest role, although he would probably punch me in the face if I were to call it that. It was
yeah,
yeah, from what I heard, he was strictly in this movie. I want to say so. He was dying,
uh,
and so he performed this movie in great pain, as I recall hearing.
yeah,
And I believe he asked, like, I think he had some movies that he'd been offered, and he asked his kids which one he should pick, and they wanted him to do Street Fighter.
yeah, uh,
Uh, he definitely elevates this movie.
yeah. Much like Frank Langella did with Masters of the Universe, when he played Skeletor in that movie. Um, Actually, this movie has a lot of commonalities with Masters of the Universe.
Yeah,
Now that I think about it.
because okay, So to take a step back, if you are somehow under a rock, or somehow have been under a rock, or you just don't do video games, Street Fighter, massively successful video game franchise,
Hmm.
has been for 30 plus years.
Yes.
Huge roster of characters, and you have the problem if you're adapting it into, like, if you're making it into a TV show. They had a really bad Saturday morning cartoon based on this, but it makes sense for a cast this large to give them a whole show to work with, because you can give each character their own episodes and subplots and everything.
Right. Yeah.
Uh, but just look at how many, like, all these characters are named characters from the games. You are not going to be able to do all of them justice in the context of a single hour and 40-minute movie.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I remember your boy Zach. I think it was him. It was mentioned like the story of the movie almost felt like it could. It was like like the script was meant for like a live action GI Joe movie, and they just swapped out all the characters with Street Fighter characters.
Yeah, I'd buy that.
Yeah.
The only characters who I think would kind of struggle to be part of that would be Ken and Ryu, since I can't really think of any GI Joe characters who would fit that role of being kind of underworld shysters who were forcibly recruited.
Yeah. Yeah, the only ones I could think of would maybe be like Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow, but that wouldn't fit.
Yeah.
Uh, but
Again, this movie doesn't really fit what little lore there was for the characters in 1994 either. So,
that's true. Yeah. But yeah, yeah. So yeah.
oh,
So
and Ninja points out the funny part is that the Shadaloo wasn't a country; it was the name of Bison's organization in the games. So it
yeah.
that's a nice way to repurpose that.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
So what's happened in the movie is that M. Bison has captured a whole bunch of people with this, not totally not the UN
Yeah.
peacekeeping organization. That, I mean, it's not the UN because they're not actually. You know what? I'm not going to make that joke because that would be inappropriate. No matter which of the various things that UN peacekeepers have done. Um, actually, you know what?
Yeah.
I can't even joke that they actually go into combat because quite often UN peacekeepers aren't allowed to directly intervene.
Nope.
So
Yeah.
I guess it makes sense that Guile is forced to go rogue
Yeah. Yeah.
to make anything happen.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But he has kidnapped a whole bunch of these people, and he has given them 72 hours to give him $20 billion, which was even more money in those days.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a good chunk of money. Yeah. Um, yeah. And so they're trying to. So Guile's trying to figure out how to get like try to find out where Bison's base is and rescue the hostages. And one of the hostages is Guile's buddy Carlos Charlie, um, and
Blanca.
Blanca. Yeah, yeah, he's Blanca. And so yeah, so Bison decides to use him for his genetic experiments. And but so Guile's trying to find out how to do that, and then the ninja says, "I don't remember Akuma."
No, he is not.
No, he's not in there.
I believe this predates Akuma being in the games.
Yeah. And so then in another part of Shadaloo, you had Sagat, who's running his little underground fighting, uh, drugs and guns,
Crime
crime.
emporium is almost what you'd call it, because it's like,
Yeah.
do you want women? Do you want underground cage fights? Do you want drugs and guns? Come on down to Sagat's General Crime Emporium.
Yeah. 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 And of course, Vega is his prize fighter. Um, and that's also where we met, as DB alluded to earlier, Ken and Ryu, who are basically a couple of low-level con artist type guys who are trying to scam Sagat, but it doesn't. But Sagat's onto him, and then
All,
he
all
tries
the
to
weapons,
put.
all the weapons are fake, and like they shoot ping pong balls. And they actually have a this movie has some pretty inspired fight scenes.
Yeah, which is pretty amazing considering they really didn't have a whole lot of time to train them in the fight choreography. From what I've heard. So it's pretty good accomplishment there. Yeah,
But, but like you have a scene where um, Ryu and Ken are fighting off Sagat's goons, who are mostly unarmed, but one of them at one point picks up a gun and forgets it was one of the ping pong guns.
yeah, yeah. Shoots Ken right in the forehead. Yeah,
Yep. Um, okay, so plot threads, I would say we have. So we had the Ken Ryu thing where they end up getting picked up by the UN forces and immediately thrown into prison with Sagat because they have a 72-hour clock, and they, I suppose in a country like Shadaloo, they don't exactly have much in the way of due process. It's like, well, we caught you at the crime emporium, to prison you go.
yeah. There was a curfew, and
Oh, that's
and
right. They were caught
it,
out after the curfew.
yeah, yeah, and if you violated the curfew, you would, or you if you resisted, you would get shot. I remember hearing that in the PA.
Uh,
Uh, mm,
so this is where Guile decides to recruit them to get on Sagat's good side, help him break out of prison, and which will, in theory, lead them right to M. Bison.
yes. So they stage a breakout, and then Ken shoots Guile, but Guile's wearing one of those like
Squibs.
squib things. Yeah, so they faked his death, and reporting on that, of course, you have Chun Li. Um,
One of the other movie threads.
yes, so Chun Li's a reporter, but she's obviously got other skills than that. So do her the two members of her news crew, which are Hondo and Balrog. It's interesting they made Balrog a good guy because he's not a good guy in the games.
There really wasn't room for another bad guy. They kind of already had the oh, who's the guy in the top right here? Um,
DJ.
DJ. They kind of had DJ being the role, like the role that you would have given Balrog, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
And
yeah,
he barely got anything to do as it was.
yeah, except for a couple of like quippy one-liners here and there. Um, yeah, and of course, what got me was the guy who played Zangief had I think a lot of the comedy. Uh,
Like, there's one scene where a bus is about to run into the crime emporium,
yeah,
and they see it on the TV screen because that was like a bomb. There's like an explosion that Chun Li had planted,
yeah,
and as
yeah,
it's getting close, he goes, "Quick, change the channel."
yeah,
That's going to stop it from running into them.
yeah, yeah. They all look at him like, "What?"
I think that was the exact moment where I said, "Oh, this isn't an accidental comedy. This is a farce on purpose." Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and so yeah, so then you got so Kennen, yeah. So Chun Li tries to kill Bison and Zagat, and it doesn't work, and then Ken and Ryu basically sell Chun Li out, and Hondo and Balrog. So that now they're all at Bison's headquarters, and Guile has a plan to take on the base by sea, but Bison's got this really sophisticated radar, so they have the stealth boat that they use instead, which very early '90s, mid '90s CGI.
Yeah. Um, I will say the scene where Guile decides to just, damn the torpedoes, and I don't care that we've been told to stand down. We're going to, we're going to launch our invasion.
Yeah,
That had a pretty decent scene. But it's like, Bison's an awful monster who's kidnapped our friends, but we've been told to stand down. And I think
yeah,
so, something to that effect was like just his repeated refrain, but we've been
yeah,
told to stand down.
yeah,
It just whips his men into a frenzy and they launch their attack.
yeah.
Um, so this movie is very quotable.
Hmm.
Earlier on I did for me, it was a Tuesday.
Yeah,
Bison is just like a really good Saturday morning cartoon villain, arguably better than this than his actual Saturday morning cartoon,
yeah,
because Raul is bringing it all. bringing his all. Meanwhile, Guile, poof,
Yeah.
I've never been a Van Damme guy. Man,
Uh,
it,
yeah.
Guile is jacked, but he can't act.
No, no,
At least
yeah.
not in this movie.
No, yeah. Van Damme was I would say probably the weakest part of this movie. Now, from what I've heard, he was doing a lot of nose candy during the making of the movie, and he and Kylie Minogue, who played Cammy in the movie, were meeting in his trailer, between scenes, if you know what I mean.
Gasp.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. As I mean, unfortunately for everybody else in the cast,
yeah,
Raul Julia kind of casts a long shadow over the movie, so
yeah, yeah. He does.
nobody else really has a chance to stand out. Most other people are just kind of competent and they get a couple of good one-liners.
Yeah. Well, like you were saying, I mean, this, the roster of Street Fighter is just so huge that it's when you put them all in a movie like this, it's hard to give them give everybody something to do. It's a bit like X-Men,
Hmm.
where you have such a large roster, and it's you're basically only focusing on like two characters, and the rest of them are almost like background.
Yeah, which eh, uh, I think that kind of, how to put it, while I'm sure that there are probably some Street Fighter purists, especially ones who came to the franchise later when more lore had a chance to build up,
Mhm.
who might take offense to this movie. I think that when you have such a bloated cast of colorful characters who, by the end of it, by and large, are their video game counterparts, costume and all,
Yeah.
uh, it's like that's not a bad approach to just kind of embrace the silliness.
Yeah. Yeah, and you'll have a much more enjoyable experience if you do it that way, as opposed to just like, oh, this is so dumb. Why are we
Because
embrace the
it's dumb on
silliness?
purpose. Just relax.
Yeah, 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 and of course, my favorite scene in the movie it was when Bison and Zagat are making their business deal, and Bison pays Zagat with the Bison dollars.
Uh, uh, it's going to have an exchange rate of one bison dollar per 5 British pounds.
And
How will that happen? It's the exchange rate I'll negotiate with them when I kidnap the queen.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that part. It's just like because it shows the delusion of Bison that it's like, oh, I already have currency with my face on it. Yeah, it's not worth anything now, but later
Someday.
on it's going to be. Yeah,
Yeah, and the thing with him is that he's at once a ridiculous madman, but at the same time, you almost believe that with this crazy world he's living in, he could pull it off. Because the
yeah,
UN was willing to give him $20 billion, which would be a hell of a jumpstart for a fledgling country's economy.
yeah. It would. Yeah,
Although we know that from real life experience that it would have all just gone to lavish palaces and military upgrades and things like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It would not have benefited the people in any way whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah, Ninja says it right. Bison is a crypto bro. And the
Yeah,
90s equivalent, yeah, make your own currency, pump and dump.
yeah,
But there are also a few adult jokes that I didn't catch the first time around. Like
yeah.
the scene where Hondo and Balrog are in prison together and they're trying to escape. Balrog, or who said it to who?
It was Balrog. Yeah.
That's right. Balrog goes, "Hey, help me out." And
No, he
Hondo
says,
says,
give me a hand."
"Give me a hand." And Hondo
Uh,
just looks him over and says, "We've been in prison for 2 hours. Talk to me in a month." I
yeah,
missed that the first time I watched it.
yeah. Yeah, that line as a kid. Zoom.
Yep.
Oh
Uh,
man.
Now, amusing things in the movie. Besides that, They did definitely tease a second movie that didn't happen,
Hmm.
which this movie was reasonably successful. Like it was a very expensive movie, but uh, it did pretty decently in the total national and international box office.
Yeah.
Also, I recall an interview or a snippet of an interview where someone from Capcom was asked how they felt about the movie underperforming, and he said, "What are you talking about? Every time it's on TV, we make $1.5 million.
Yeah.
This got a lot of play on cable back in the day."
Yeah, it did. Yeah. And of course, you also had the video sales and video rental sales. So, I mean,
Yep.
mm,
Yeah, this was a cash cow.
yeah,
Probably funded a lot of classic Capcom video games.
yeah, yeah. It probably didn't get a sequel largely because of Raul Julia's passing. That
Right.
might have had something to do with it.
Uh, Also, kind of a large, unwieldy cast of varying levels of fame.
That's true. Yeah.
N- Now, what's funny is that we were talking about how hard it was to make a movie with such a bloated cast. So, like 10-ish years later, they said, okay, we'll just make a Street Fighter movie focused on one character as the point of view character. And we'll pick a character that everybody likes, Chun-Li, and it'll be a great movie. And that one is just a bad, bad movie. I've watched it. It's
Yeah,
i-
that movie's horrible.
imminently
Yeah,
forgettable.
yeah, it is.
Uh,
Well, when you cast Lana Lang from Smallville to play Chun Li,
Oh
yeah,
no, did they?
yeah,
Oh
yeah,
no. Oh, that's
yeah.
right. There was like the flap at the time because as a child she looked much more Chinese than the actual than like the actress who they had as her adult counterpart.
Right, yeah.
Oh, yeah. No,
Yeah,
no, this movie is worth a watch. Now
yeah,
I will say my second go around, I wasn't as entertained as my first go around 20 years ago. But part of that is the first time I watched it in the perfect environment. A bunch of friends who were just there to take the piss out of a bad movie and eat snacks, and there wasn't alcohol served, but that might for people who partake in such things rather than sucking down Diet Cokes when it gets hot,
yeah.
uh, that might be a way to enhance the proceedings.
Yes, yeah. It definitely helped me when I was rewatching it.
Uh, I'll also say that because we picked our review topics so late in the week and I was kind of busy, I there are times when we're watching stuff for review where I have plenty of time to absorb it. And then there's this week where I was kind of playing catch up. So that
Yeah,
when the movie feels like homework, that always hurts my enjoyment of it a bit.
yeah.
But it is objectively one of the best bad movies of all time.
Indeed, yes.
Uh, the other funny thing is, and this was pointed out by the podcast "How Did This Get Made" back in the day. They never actually define what a Street Fighter is in the movie.
No, they don't.
Because when you think about it, like, okay, in the context of the video game, bunch of one-on-one, matches, usually out on the street rather than being indoors,
Hmm.
perfect sense.
Yeah,
In this one, it's like this is more like a military operation, like a paramilitary operation than a street fight.
yeah,
And the last fight happens in M. Bison's fortress. Like I don't think there's. I guess unless you count the Crime Emporium, which was partially outdoors, as being a street fight.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. If you want an actual like Street Fighter adaptation that has like street fights, there was an anime of Street Fighter 2 that was uh um
Oh, hi, Art by Florence.
oh hi. Yes, Florence, by the way, did all of our art here.
Oh, nice.
Yes. Um but the anime Street Fighter 2 has a lot of street fighting in it.
Yeah. Oh, there's also one gag I just have to share that I loved. They're at this bazaar where they're selling various secondhand weapons. Like, the new Iraqi tank, 5 speeds, 2 forward, 3 reverse.
Oh yeah.
uh,
The helicopter from the U.S. Embassy in Saigon.
Only flown once.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a silly, irreverent movie, and it's worth a watch.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Well, I think we've said all we need to say for this week.
Indeed. Um,
Yeah.
Now, next week we should be able to return at our normal time again,
Yes.
uh, and we may have already selected our classic movie, which answers the question: should you suck HUDs directly or by proxy?
Okay. Yeah.
If that
Yes.
makes no sense, it might make more sense next week.
Indeed. Yes. Well, thank you for everybody for tuning in. We appreciate it as always. Hit